Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 13 of Across the Board. Across the Board is a podcast on corporate governance from the board of directors' perspective, risk management, and compliance. Today I have back with me Rakhi Kumar. Rakhi is with State Street Global Advisors in a role as a managing director, head of ESG and Investment and Asset Stewardship. We take a look at SSgA's call for greater gender diversity at the board of directors level. This has been a year-long quest by SSG as they move forward into 2018. It began last year with their Fearless Girl campaign, also in approaching corporate boards in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia. In November, this program expanded to Japan and Canada. We take a look at why boards should seek greater gender diversity, the results that SSgA has seen from its gender diversity campaign, and why gender diversity is such a positive aspect for the board. Also, SSgA has a 5-step framework that you can utilize in creating greater gender diversity that we go over. It's a fascinating interview, certainly timely in view of the Weinstein scandal and the Me Too movement. There are several documents that SSgA has put out on this that we're going to link to in the show notes. This is Tom Fox. Thank you for listening to this episode of Across the Board. Across the Board is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, back again for another episode, and today I am extraordinarily pleased to have back with me Rakhi Kumar. Rakhi is the Managing Director, Head of ESG Investment and Asset Stewardship at State Street Global. I've had her on the podcast before, and today we're going to talk about a really exciting initiative, but more than exciting, I think it's an incredibly important initiative SSgA has announced, and it is gender diversity on the board. So, Rakhi, with that introduction, thank you again for taking the time to visit with us today.
No, thank you very much for having me.
So in November, SSG announced it was expanding its guidance on corporate board diversity to public companies in Japan and Canada. That was not the starting point, though. This is something that's been an ongoing campaign and debate within, or not debate, but campaign by SSgA for some time. But could you tell us what led to the November initiative, Rakhi?
Absolutely, yeah. So in the start of this year, in 2017, ahead of International Women's Day, State Street began its Fearless Girl campaign. And that campaign really was about bringing attention to the lack of women on boards, on company boards. And as part of that campaign, we placed the statue of a girl in the middle of Wall Street, and she became an overnight international sensation, and became a symbol for diversity and lack of diversity, both at company boards and in society, and the issues in society. With the Fearless Girl campaign, we really had identified 3 markets, which were the U.S., Australia, and UK, where we were going to screen companies that had no women on boards and take voting action if they did not have a discussion, engage with companies to understand how they approach diversity. But if we felt that they were not serious or couldn't explain how they brought in diverse thoughts, etc., into the board, then we would take voting action. What we were really looking for was for boards we always look for boards to be strong, effective, independent. And we believe that diversity of thought and background on board helps make boards stronger. And that is really why we undertook the Fearless Girl campaign. And so I'll stop there. Yeah.
Rakhi, in April of 2017, the firm released a white paper, a report entitled Gender Intelligence, Bridging the Gap with Research, Science, and Relevance. And I had to say some of the findings released were just stunning, particularly the first bullet point that 37% of MBAs are women, yet only 4.6 of S&P 500 CEOs are women. But more to the point you ended with, it noted that both companies with a higher proportion of women in their executive committees have a better financial performance, 41% better return on equity, and 56% better in terms of overall earnings before interest and taxes. And that teams with an equal mix of women and men outperformed male-dominated teams in profit and sales, and performance peaked when a team had about 55% of women. So with that background and the Fearless Girl campaign, which you're absolutely right, I think was literally a worldwide if not announcement, it certainly was a worldwide event that everyone across the globe could understand and be a part of. Has SSgA seen any results from its gender diversity campaign as yet?
Absolutely. We have had conversations with many companies. We've seen many companies add women on board, and we will be announcing that shortly. We are still doing the numbers, but I could say that it is a very it's a strong number. In addition, I think it's the conversations we're having with companies. It's the fact that we're raising this issue on a systemic level, at a company level, not just a company but market-wide level, that has been transformative. And some of the good conversations are with companies who already have a woman on their board, and they come to us and they say, "Look, we know we already have a woman, and we are not going to get screened out for voting action, but we have just started. We are prioritizing enhancing diversity on our boards." And I think that is where this conversation is going. And I think, you talked a lot about the impact, like the actual evidence that having more diverse boards actually helps long-term performance. And we've had companies say, but it makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you? Especially when you try to understand who companies are serving and the broader society and the diversity in society. How do you get those thoughts of those individuals who are your customers or clients or employees that you're targeting, that you want to have them represented on the board?
Rakhi, the campaign SSgA started, I believe, was incredibly prescient and important in light of the Weinstein scandal. Based upon that, have you found, or has SSgA found companies open to having this conversation, or more open, I should say?
Yeah, I think boards are struggling as much as shareholders are with regards to how do you ensure that you don't have a culture that perpetuates behavior that's unacceptable. Most companies will talk and demonstrate that they have policies, right? But we know policies do not necessarily create culture. And I think that's where the conversations we've had with female board directors have been very interesting, because they're the ones who really see themselves as trying to raise these questions and ensure that there is gender equality at all levels of management on broader issues. So I think that, I can't say that without a woman on the board, boards are not taking this seriously, but I can definitely say that the conversations we've had with female board directors have been is very powerful, and they feel personally responsible for actions on the board.
Rakhi, I'd now like to turn to a speech given by State Street President and COO O Hanley at the fourth biennial Breakfast of Corporate Champions hosted by the Women's Forum of New York back in November. The speech was entitled "Expanding the Call for Board Gender Diversity." And one of the things that struck me was Ron laid out a process or a protocol by which companies could begin to take a look at their own boards and ask questions about, or at least engage in internal conversation about board diversity. And it really laid out a format and framework for companies to think about this. And I was wondering if you could just walk us through this.
Right. So when we look at board diversity, and as shareholders, we've been targeting board diversity because we elect directors, but really diversity goes through across the organization. It becomes a pipeline issue very quickly. Do you have qualified women to become directors on boards. And I think one of the questions we have when we engage with companies, they're like, well, we want a woman, but we just can't find a qualified individual. And that got us thinking as to what really are the barriers? Is it that there are not enough qualified women, or is it the way we're approaching the nomination and the election and the identification of director candidates that's a concern? So what we have really tried to identify is a pathway that companies and boards can undertake to enhance diversity. And there are 5 real issues we're focusing on. The first one is, are you asking for a very narrow, defining the individual you're looking for, or as in a very narrow construct, putting constraints such as we need a person who served as a CEO. Now we know there are not that many female CEOs. So if you require a director to be a serving CEO or have served as a CEO, you're considerably reducing your pool. Now, the question we're asking companies is, do you need every director to have been a serving CEO? So can we expand that? Do we need? Let's ask ourselves if we need that. The second bit is assessing current levels of women at different levels of management, right? So how many women do you have at every level of management? Because eventually your pipeline is also something that will help create more women candidates, more qualified women candidates for everyone for all listed companies, and so and a culture and promote a culture of diversity within the organization. So, are you actually tracking these metrics, and are you setting goals, long-term goals, to achieve broader and promote broader diversity at every level of management? The third one is, are you acting on these metrics that you're seeing? What actions are you taking? Are you trying to address the biases? Are you trying to change your promotion practices, etc.? The fourth one is about identifying diversity champions within your firm. So both at the board level and at management level. It doesn't have to necessarily be a woman. It can be males who can be change agents and diversity champions, where they are promoting identification and promoting women, and asking and be responsible for asking, why is it that we don't have that many women at different levels of senior levels of management? And the fifth one is actually communicating this, being more transparent about it, right? Actually turning around and saying that these are our numbers and this is where we want to go. It's a journey and we understand it. But that's aspirational where we want to be and we hope to be. Because without that transparency, you're not going to hold yourself accountable for pushing diversity.
Rakhi, I found this to be an incredibly powerful set of questions to ask and actions to take. And it really ties into one of the things that struck me that you said earlier, which was this is really about a conversation. And what I wanted to ask, are companies open to having the conversations around this framework that you laid out? Does this help not only SSgA talk to them, but help them talk internally to themselves?
Yes, and I do believe that most companies are starting to raise these questions now. We've only had a few conversations with companies where they have said, we agree to disagree with you in the sense that, we see this as a cost and we are happy with our board right now. And when in the next round, when we're looking for a new director, then we will think of looking for a female candidate. But for now, we're fine. We've had very few such conversations, right? So most companies have really said, got it, understand where you're coming from, give us some time. We will look at this issue differently, and thank you so much for working with us. And I think that's where we think that this is not a overnight change. This will take time, but if you don't raise the issues now, tomorrow is going to look the same without us bringing up these issues, and we don't want tomorrow to look the same.
Rakhi, I was wondering if I could change the focus a little bit now to ask, what does SSgA view as its role as an asset manager?
Yes. So, Tom, you did cut out a little bit there, but I would say that in general, we are your long term. We through our index business, we are your quintessential long term shareholder. And as a long term shareholder, we are very focused on long-term issues that impact value. If you think of us as being paid out last, a long-term shareholder is paid out last after everyone else is, whether it's the government in fines, whether it is employees, whether it's your debt holders. So we really have to take your broader interests in mind when we look at it. So and in addition, as an index holder, you can't sell your shares, so you have to engage. And when we engage with companies, we go ahead and raise questions which shareholders, active or short-term shareholders, may not raise, such as diversity.
Rakhi, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time, but I was wondering if there's anything that you would like to add that we haven't been able to articulate around SSgA's gender diversity campaign.
No, I think for the only thing I would end with is saying that this is a journey. I think we've made a very good start. I think the Fearless Girl has helped raise the issue not only in the markets we targeted, but actually worldwide, which is one of the reasons we expanded to Canada and Japan. And we'll continue to look at new markets when we feel they're ready. We will go into other markets. And I think that having other asset managers also prioritize diversity following our announcement has been very helpful, as it's important for companies to hear that diversity matters not just from SSgA, but from the broader investment community.
So I've been visiting with Rakhi Kumar. She's the managing director at SSgA, head of ESG investment and asset stewardship. We've been talking about the gender diversity campaign by State Street Global Advisors. We have talked about several white papers and documents and information released by State Street Global, which we'll link to in the show notes. Rakhi, I want to thank you again for taking the time to visit with me, and I look forward to your next initiative. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of Across the Board. If you have any questions about Across the Board, corporate governance at the board level, or risk management, please feel free to email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Also, if you would rate this podcast, if you have listened to it on iTunes, as it would help in our ratings and also help get the word out about one of the singular podcasts on board and corporate governance and risk management. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you'll join us again for another episode of Across the Board. Across the Board is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.